Welcome to my channel Chemistry with the DNA. I am NAUMAN Ahmad, and today we are going to start lecture number 3 of thermodynamics. So today we are going to discuss the topic, and the topic is intensive and extensive properties. What is extensive and intensive properties? So this is a small topic of thermodynamics. You need to know about what is intensive and what is extensive properties. So intensive and extensive is very much important. So let's define intensive. Definition of what is the definition of intensive properties? So intensity property is the property of thermodynamics. The property which does not depend upon the amount of matter, or we can say amount of matter, size and quantity of matter of a system is called intensive properties. So first of all, we are going to start intensive properties. What is intensive properties? Intensive property. So this is the definition of intensive properties. Intensive property is the property which does not depend upon amount of matter, size and quantity of matter of a system. As I discussed a system in the previous lecture, what is a system? Any substance which is under observation and which is under investigation is called a system. Anything under observation or investigation is called system. So this property, intensive properties, are those properties which does not depend upon the size, quantity and amount of matter present in a system is called intensive properties. So what about the extensive properties? The definition will be the same, but let me remove extensive. Now, if there is extensive properties, so what is extensive properties? So the property which does depend upon, we will just remove not. So the definition will be which does depend upon the amount of matter, size and quantity of matter of a system is called extensive property. It means it is a dependent. This is dependent, this is independent, this is independent, and this is dependent. Intensive property is independent of amount of matter, size and quantity of matter of a system, while extensive property is dependent upon the amount of matter, size and quantity of matter of a system. So that's why there is a small difference between definition extensive and intensive property. Intensive is totally independent, extensive is totally dependent. So let's compare it with each other, then you will get the better idea. We should make a table. Here I will write intensive property, and here I will write extensive properties, extensive and intensive properties. Okay, these are the I just draw the table, and we are going to write all the properties of extensive, example of intensive and extensive properties. The very first which we are going to discuss, that is temperature. The intensive, that is temperature. Temperature is intensive. Pressure is also pressure. density. Let me write 1, 2, and 3. Temperature, pressure, density, specific heat, capacity. Specific heat capacity is also intensive properties. That's why refractive index is also refractive index. Number 6 is viscosity is also viscosity. These are the temperature, pressure, density. Of course, specific heat capacity, refractive index, viscosity, and all the concentration terms like number 7. Where should I write 7? Let me write 7. Concentration terms like A, B, C, D, like molarity. Number 2, molality, normality, and mole fraction. All these properties are called intensive properties. It does not depend upon amount, size, and quantity of matter of a system. So this is totally intensive properties, which will cover all your topics. Okay, extensive properties are those properties and suppose there is one more property also. Ionization energy is also, let me write 8. Ionization energy is also intensive property. What are the extensive properties? Extensive properties is totally opposite of those, like volume, heat capacity. Specific heat capacity is intensive, but only heat capacity is a extensive property. All the energy terms like energy, work, entropy, enthalpy, Gibbs free energy. Don't be confused all these terms. We will be discussing these terms in the thermodynamics, so we'll be having a lot of discussion on it later on in the next coming videos. And internal energy is also. Internal energy. These are all extensive properties. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. This is 5. So these are the properties of extensive and intensive properties. So this is, let me define it again. Extensive properties, it does depend upon amount, size, and quantity of matter of a system. So it is totally dependent. It is totally independent. Extensive properties is totally independent, and extensive properties is totally dependent upon these 3 things: size, quantity, and matter. And these things are totally independent. It does not depend upon the size, quantity, and amount of substance present in a system. So these are some small topic of thermodynamics in lecture number. Today we just started lecture number 3, and in lecture number 3 we discuss extensive and intensive properties. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take a very good care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum.